Welcome back to Explorer. This is your host, Jonathan Nathaniel Hayes. This week's episode is something a little different. I'm sharing a recent keynote address I gave at an annual Chamber of Commerce banquet right here in Maine. It was a sold-out ballroom full of hardworking folks, daydreamers and doers, entrepreneurs. We talked about what exploration really means today. Courage, perseverance, and the kind of vision it takes to build something lasting in your community or on the trail. So settle in and join me for this live event. My name is Jonathan Hayes. I'm a former United States Marine, and I have 3 sons currently serving our country, and very proud of that. I teach at a small K-12 school in northern Maine in the suburb of Madawaska. Senegat, I'm not French, but that's how they say it up there at Wisdom High School. Pastor a small home missions church, father of a lot of kids, and husband of a beautiful wife. And I have been mushing sled dogs for 30 years. And just really, that's been a big part of my passion, who I am, and what I do. And that's what I came here to share with you tonight. So, start the clock now. You ready? Okay, here we go. Everyone's got food. You're happy. You're not going to, mutiny on me. We're good. Drinks are here. Okay. 1925, it was the perfect storm. There was no roads into Nome. The ocean had frozen up, so ships could not make it in. The planes of 1925 could not fly in the extreme conditions. And to make matters worse, the storm of the century was blowing in. And that is when diphtheria decided to break out in the village of Nome, Alaska. Unlike COVID, which targeted primarily the elderly that we're familiar with, 100 years ago, diphtheria targeted children. It was known as the strangler of children. Children that were completely healthy today could be dead within 3 days. So antitoxin had to get to the village of Nome. There was only one way to get it there, and that was by dog sled team. There were 20 mushers that mushed over 20 mushers that mushed over 750 miles in a relay with 150 dogs to save the children of Nome. And some of them you've heard about. Who's watched the Disney movie Balto? All right. The cartoons, actually, there's been several of them. Balto was the lead dog of a guy named Gunnar Kaysen, who ran the last leg of the Serum Run into Nome. He only ran about 50 miles of the entire Serum Run, but because he was the one that crossed the finish line, he and Balto got most of the praise and most of the credit from the press. There were other guys like Edgar Callens. In fact, 17 of the mushers were natives of Alaska, either Eskimo or Athabascan mushers, representing their own people as they traveled in this relay. But no one traveled further or risked more than a man named Leonard Seppala and his team of Seppala Siberian sled dogs. You will see here Edgar Callens, and we're going to be talking in a minute about Wild Bill Shannon there in the middle on top with his lead dog Blackie. And here you have Balto, Gunnar Kaysen, but over here you have Leonard Seppala with his lead dogs. And yes, the goofy one over here in the corner, that is the one that we're here to talk about the most. That is Togo. No one risked more, no one traveled further than Leonard Seppala and his dogs. They traveled over 250 miles of the 750 miles, and they crossed the Norton Bay sea ice not once to save time and to save lives. They crossed the Norton Bay sea ice twice to save lives and to save time. After 1925, as you know, Balto and Gunnar Kaysen got most of the credit at first, but after the news got out, people began to understand that it was actually Leonard Seppala and Togo who were the real heroes of the expedition. So they brought them down to the lower 48 states, and they did a tour of the lower 48, and guess where they finished? Right here at Cindy Robbins' Poland Spring Resort. There was a musher here in Maine that challenged Leonard Seppala to a race. right here in 1927. And Leonard Seppala took him up on the challenge. His dogs hadn't been in training. They'd been in rail cars, and they'd been on display. He pulled them out of the rail cars, hooked them up to a sled, and handily beat every musher in New England at the Poland Spring Dog Derby in 1927. And that caught the eye of a lady who owned this establishment, then Elizabeth Ricker. Elizabeth Ricker decided to offer Leonard Seppala a partnership. They would establish the very first Seppala kennels right here in Poland Spring, Maine, right here on this property. And that is the birthplace of the first Seppala kennel that has now become the official state dog of the state of Maine as of May, thanks to some of these great men like David Boyer and other politicians that are in the room. Thank you for being here. Let's give them a hand. So fast forward, I've had these dogs for 30 years. I won't go through the history of them or how I got them. We can talk about that later. You're welcome to come and geek out with me, ask me as many questions as you want. Cindy Robbins and I met about 10 years ago, and during COVID, she called me up. All the races, the Can-Am and everything was canceled, all the races, and she said, Jonathan, I want to raise money for a serum. I want to raise money for a Togo monument at Poland Springs. And I said, well, I'll run an expedition across the North Woods of Maine solo and raise some money for that and help to garner some attention. And she said, well, when would you do that? And I said, 2 weeks, 2 weeks from now. So in 2 weeks, we decided to do this. And as you know, the monument is now standing outside of the State House. And so that was the beginning of all of this insanity. And so as reporters often do, they said, what's next? What's next? What's next? And so I started thinking about what's next. 2025, this year, is the 100-year anniversary of the saving of the children of Nome by Togo, by Leonard Seppala, and by these dogs. So my wheels started turning, and I decided that one team, not 20 teams, one team, my team, the descendants of Leonard Seppala's dogs from Maine, would go up there, and the Alaskans thought we were crazy. The Alaskans said, and you can ask my partners in the expedition, they said, we don't even travel between villages at this time of year. That's how crazy this is. And Mainers coming up here thinking that they can do this, it's not going to happen. That's what we were told several times. So we go up there, and we're going to run the entire 750-mile relay, not with 20 teams, but with one team of purebred, registered Seppala Siberian sled dogs that are now the official state dog. I knew that if I was going to do this, I was going to need a strong team. And we're going to talk about team building and leadership here for a second. It's easy to surround yourself with yes men. It's easy to surround yourself with people who are just going to go along with whatever your plan is. But in order to do great things, you need to surround yourself with exceptional people. Exceptional people are going to come with their own opinions. They're going to come with their own mindset. But what made this expedition work so well was everyone respected everyone else in their wheelhouse. Mushing was my thing. Dogs were my thing. But they had, 100 years ago, they had all of these roadhouses every 50 miles where the mushers could just pull in and have all the food they wanted, food for their dogs. They could sleep next to a fire, and then another musher would take the next relay. We didn't have those. This region of Maine is actually, of Alaska, is actually less populated now than it was then. It's actually more remote now than it was during the gold rush era. So instead of having the roadhouses, we had snow machiners. And 2 men from here in Maine joined the expedition with their snow machines. So if you love snow machines, you got to talk to these guys, because I tell you, their expedition, which paralleled my expedition, was every bit as harrowing as mine. They could write a book and they could stand up here and tell this story differently, but with just as much excitement. And so these are the guys. I don't, why the guns? Because America, that's why, I don't know. So Jamie Nichols, would you stand? and Jeff Kelly. Would you stand? Let's give them a hand. Jamie Nichols, thank you guys. Jamie Nichols was the chief engineer of the expedition. Just like you had the Fran that took Roald Amundsen to all of his expeditions back in the golden age of exploration, just like Ernest Shackleton went to the South Pole in the Endurance, we went to Alaska in Jamie's Dodge diesel Ram pickup truck with 32-foot trailer hauling behind, and his truck was our Fran. It was what got us to the field of operation. And then when we got there, if anything was broke, if Jamie couldn't fix it, it could not be fixed. And if Jeff couldn't get it unstuck, no one could get it unstuck. And I knew Jamie, I didn't know Jeff, but we became very close friends on this expedition. And just as a benefit, I found out about Jeff that not only is Jeff a can-do guy with a positive attitude, but he loved dogs just as much as I did, and the dogs responded to him as well as they responded to me, and so the team was set. And so we started. We got stuck in an avalanche for 18 hours before we even got to the start of this expedition. When we finally got to the start, the mayor, this is the mayor here coming out to hand me a 100-year-old antique serum box from the Alaska Railroad Museum for me to carry throughout this expedition. He came out, the mayor did, and wished us well as we were departing. As I was departing, Jamie and Jeff had spent 2 days trying to get the 50 miles to our very first roadhouse location where we were going to stop for the night. And after 2 days of trying, just as I'm about to pull the quick stick to release my dogs, I get a satellite link message from Jamie saying, "We need another plan. This is impassable." And I was like, "This was our plan C, Jamie. We've got to make this work." In the first 48 hours of the expedition, we experienced a 100-degree temperature shift. A 100-degree temperature shift from 40 degrees above zero to 60, 65 below zero in just that short period of time. So we knew that cold snap was coming, and the hope was that everything would freeze up solid enough to carry the weight of the snow machines and carry us to our first location. We finally got there. It was a lot of stories that I don't have time to tell you tonight. So this is my subarctic initiation. This is my baptism by fire. On the second leg of the trip, the guys had gone ahead to get to Manly Hot Springs, and I was traveling at night. And I had forgotten that our filmmaker, we have Caleb Gingras from Canada, is a North Face filmmaker who's working on a documentary about this right now. He had been leapfrogging ahead of me to find nice locations to film the team, and then he'd go ahead again. And we came to this spot where I came up the steep ridge, and the sled teetered at the top, and then it started to come down. And just as it was teetering, I saw his headlamp flashing in the distance to warn me that there was some problems. Well, it might have been a moose. It could have been overflow. It could be open water. I didn't know what the problem could be. So as I took my headlamp, and this is the middle of the night, we had already reached probably 50 below zero. This was going to be one of the coldest nights of the expedition. I looked down the ridge that my 16-dog team was charging us down to see that my lead dogs, Druid and King, were already swimming in open water at 50 below zero or colder, trying to self-rescue themselves and get themselves out. So I dropped my snow hooks before I even said whoa, jerked the team to a stop, and I'm half sliding and half running down the hill, hoping that by the time I get to the water, my dogs have pulled themselves out. No such luck. So I did what the Marine Corps taught me to do. I laid down on my belly and I low crawled out on the ice, and I'm reaching for my lead dogs. And just before I grab Druid's harness, King climbs on top of him and pushes him down. I grab a hold of King's harness, and when I try to lift them up out of the water, these wet 60-pound dogs, two of them, when I try to lift them up out of the water and I'm laying on my belly, all of that concentrated weight pushed me through the ice. And so in the middle of the night, At least 2 hours from the next village, I am completely submerged. How deep was the water? I don't know, but I could not stand up. As much as I tried to reach the bottom, I couldn't reach the bottom. So holding on to my dog's harness, I, again, did what the Marine Corps taught me to do. I kicked with my feet and kind of squirmed back up on the ice inch by inch until I got back up there, but I was still on the wrong side of the open water. So I had to cross. I looked for a better place to cross, and my dogs were making me drag them, as you can see up there, because they were like, this ice is no good. They knew this ice wasn't any good, but we had to cross. And so at that point, we crashed through the ice again. And this time, my dogs were like, oh, look, a human bridge to the other side. And so all 16 dogs just start marching over me and pushing me under the water. I'd love to tell you that they rescued me and they drugged me. No, they were like, oh, yeah, this will work. And so when we got over to the other side, I heard a voice say, what's the plan, Jonathan? And I was like, God? I was like, oh, yeah. Caleb, the cameraman, he's here. And Caleb was filming. He was filming the whole time. I mean, here I am, like floundering for my life. And he's like, oh, yeah, this is what I'm talking about. This is awesome. And he said, so what's the plan? You want me to start a fire? And I said, well, fire would be the best thing for me, but it's not the best thing for these 16 dogs. We've got to get as much moisture off of them as we can, and we got to get them moving as quickly as we can. And so when we pulled into Manly Hot Springs, my bibs were so frozen to my boots that I could not take one off without taking the other off. And when I went to take my pack boots off, the woolen socks inside my pack boots were frozen to the inside of the boot. I could not take the boot off without it ripping the woolen socks off my feet. That's how cold it was. But guess what? 100 years ago, same thing. Edgar Callens, when he arrived in Manly Hot Springs, the owner of the roadhouse had to bring out boiling water and pour it over his hands to free his hands from the brush bow of the sled. This is what you need to know. 100 years ago, 5 dogs died during this relay. It was a relay. They were running segments of the trail that they knew well and traveled weekly, and 5 dogs died during this relay. And subsequent dogs died after the relay because of complications of the run. Losing a dog to my team and to myself was not an option on this expedition. We could not lose one dog. We couldn't risk the life of one dog. And this is what I discovered as we went through this expedition. You and I, we are naked tropical monkeys. Yes, we are. These dogs have been bred for 9,000 years in the Arctic. And what they told me every time that the trial got really bad, every time the going got really rough, was we're home. I mean, they were like college boys at a frat party. Whenever it got like 60 below and the wind was blowing and the wind was howling, even the dogs that were goofing off most of the time, they kicked in and they were like, heck yeah, let's do this. And I would just sit back on the sled, really thinking I was about to die, looking at my team going, shut up, Jonathan, don't say a word, you're going to screw this up. This is beautiful. Because these dogs were shining in a way I didn't understand, and they showed me what their character was and why they deserved to be the state dog of the state of Maine. When we were pulling out of one of the villages on the Yukon, we were pulling out of Ruby. We had thought long and hard about staying in Ruby that night because the hospitality there at this native village was so good. But we needed to keep moving, so we decided that we'd head out. And the gas stations in these villages don't open till 11:30, 12 o'clock in the afternoon. So the guys on the snow machines were waiting around for the gas station, and I took off. And about 2 hours out of the village, I see something in the trail ahead. Everything's white. The sky's white, the river's white, everything's just white. And I see this form standing up in the trail, and it's moving. Now, when my dogs see another human, they get excited because they're like, yeah, pets, and he's going to stop and talk. So we get a break. This is awesome. They get really excited. When they see an animal, they also get excited, but it's different. They want to chase it. They want to run it down. You know, that predator, the prey drive, and they're a pack. They're a wolf pack, and they just want to kill it. But this was different. Whatever it was in the trail that they were seeing scared my dogs. All 16 of them started pulling away and trying to avoid whatever was in the trail, and that got me scared. And then I realized that what I was looking at was someone dragging a leg with a curled up hand moving toward my team. And when I pulled my team alongside this person, he just collapsed on my sled. He had been out the entire night before. His snow machine had gotten swamped in the open water of the river, and trying to save himself, he had fallen into the water several times. And although he was trying to walk to free himself, I found him just half a mile from where he had lost his snow machine. And he had walked all night. His feet were frozen to his boots. His hand was frozen into his sleeve because he had lost one of his gloves. I wasn't a hero. The next village was like, oh, you guys are heroes. I wasn't a hero. I didn't do anything that you wouldn't have done or I wouldn't have done. I gave him my coffee. I was kind of upset that I didn't have any coffee for the rest of the day, but I love coffee. I gave him all my hot packs and packed him in and put my anorak on him, and I called for the Alaska State Troopers to come and rescue him. And I didn't do anything anyone else wouldn't do, but there was a theme that was starting to develop in this expedition, and that was this: destiny, predestined. I don't believe in chance. I believe in providence. I believe that it's no chance that I was the exact same age that Leonard Seppala was, exactly 100 years after him, running the exact same trails with the descendants of his dogs. And I don't believe that it was chance that I was there at this place when this native elder needed me to be there. As we drew closer to the coast, there's this place called Old Woman Cabin. And if you love the Iditarod, you know about this place. It's supposed to be haunted, and mushers are supposed to leave chocolates there at the cabin to appease the old woman. If you don't appease the old woman, she will curse the rest of your expedition. So I ran out, threw my pack boots on, found a little Snickers that I had saved just for this occasion, and I brought it and I put it on the cabin, not because I believe in curses, not because I'm worried about any of that stuff, but because it was a beautiful, wonderful tradition that I just wanted to participate in. And that was it. I didn't think anything else about it, except it was the only night on the entire expedition, and these two gentlemen will verify that this is true. It is the only night on the expedition that the northern lights came out just as we were putting those treats there for the old woman. And why is that significant? Because the Eskimo and the Athabascan believe that these northern lights are the spirits of their ancestors, the spirits of their elders. And then the time came where I had to make the decision that Leonard Seppala made. We pulled up to the shore of Norton Bay. Were we going to cross the sea ice or were we not? This was an unprecedented and unpredictable year. Everyone in Alaska was telling us. And they were saying this, you're probably not going to be able to do it. You're probably going to have to skirt around it just because the conditions have been so horrible. But the good news that we received when we got to this point was that some Eskimo natives had just for the first time of the year ventured out and crossed the ice. And our team decided if anyone can cross, we can cross. And it was a beautiful day. The sun was shining. It was really cold. And the wind was blowing, but it was so sunny, and the ravens were dancing over the trail, inviting us out like a siren of the sea. Come on out. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. Just come on out onto the ice. And man, it was so beautiful until we committed, until we got in. And that's when this happened. And my dogs once again showed their mettle. I could not see my lead dogs. And my lead dogs by instinct took me across this bay of sea ice more than 20 miles without any land in sight in a blowing gale of at least 50 to 70 mile an hour winds. And so then we got to the thing I dreaded. Whenever a reporter asked me, what do you fear most about this expedition? There are a lot of things we can replicate here in Maine. We can replicate 40 below zero sometimes. We can replicate overflow. We can replicate deep snow. What can we not replicate here? The coast, the winds, and the ice. The extreme winds of the coast of Alaska. That's what scared me. And there's one place that is infamous on the trail. It's so bad that it's given its own moniker, the blowhole. And champion Iditarod mushers have been forced to hit their SOS button in the spot several times to be rescued by the Coast Guard and be pulled out because of this spot. What makes it so bad? The mountains are in such a shape that they create a vortex of hurricane force winds that come down on this 20-mile stretch of the coast and just blast you. Add to that 40 below zero temperatures, and the conditions there can reach 120 below zero Fahrenheit or worse. It is a literal death trap, and that's what I had been afraid of. That's what I had secretly worried about the entire time that we had gone on this expedition until we got to this spot, and it did not disappoint, and my brothers over here will agree. But here's the beautiful thing, and man, there's so many stories I could tell you. I want to invite you, buy the book, not because I want the money, but because there's some really great stories in there. 100 Winters, retracing the great race against death. Just because it goes into so much detail, I want to encourage you to buy that book. But this is what happened. The snow machine started failing. The snow machine started breaking down. Why? Well, Jamie and Jeff were worried that I was going to get run over. So they came back and they were trying to escort me through. But because they were moving more slowly now, the wind was packing their motors with snow and ice. And so their machines kept breaking down. We found a place to crash for the night. And I reached out via satellite to some mushers. And they said, Hayes, you made a big mistake. You never stop in the blowhole. You stop before, you stop after, you never stop in the blowhole. And so they said, if you're going to wait for it to calm down, you could be there for 2 weeks. So at first light, you're going to have to hitch up your dogs and you're going to have to march out of there. And the guys worked on their snow machines in the morning and got them running, and by the time I hitched up the dogs, their snow machines were broken down again, and finally we get everything moving and on the trail, and while we're moving and going, the snow machines keep breaking down, but what's not breaking down all of this time? The dogs. The dogs were like, heck yeah, this is awesome. And I couldn't believe it. It was a side of my dogs that I had never seen before, and it was an indomitable spirit that I think really characterizes the spirit of Maine. That's why I'm so glad the state has decided to take this on as the state dog. And so finally, Jamie and I talk and we're like, hey, that machines keep breaking down. One of them's running. Why don't you haul the one that's not running to Nome with the one that is running? Get out of here. Get them fixed. The dogs just need to keep moving. We need to keep moving. We need to get out of this. And so that was the decision we made. And as soon as Jeff and Jamie pull away to Nome, I feel a hand on my shoulder, and it's that cameraman again, Caleb, and he goes, my snow machine won't start. Oh, God. And so I threw a temper tantrum. I kicked my sled and threw stuff and swore and did all the things that guys do, and then asked Jesus to forgive me. And then I started pulling stuff out of my sled, and he said, what are you doing? I said, hop in. We're leaving the snow machine here. The dogs didn't care. 1 man, 2 man, they didn't care. They were going to march to Nome, and that's what they did. So the dogs didn't fail. The dogs kept pulling. The dogs kept working. And the harder the conditions got, the more extreme it got, the more they showed their grit, their character, and what they were made of. And so these are pictures of us pulling into Nome, children coming to greet the dogs. And there's so many things I'd love to share with you. The kids were the best part. These native children pouring out of the villages, even in the middle of the night, just to dote over the dogs and love on these dogs that are so much a part of their heritage. was one of the biggest highlights for anyone on this team. But what struck me, I thought that I was doing this to retrace Leonard Seppala's steps. But if you'll remember at the beginning of this talk, I said that it was actually Gunnar Kaysen and Balto that came into the finish, that actually finished in Nome, right? Not Leonard Seppala and not Toga. It was Gunnar Kaysen. Gunnar Kaysen worked for Leonard Seppala. Gunnar Kaysen was running Leonard Seppala's dogs. Balto actually belonged to Seppala, just like Togo did. All of the dogs that Gunnar Kaysen finished with were actually Leonard Seppala's dogs. Why is that important? Because I thought I was walking in the steps of Leonard Seppala. But as I was coming down Front Street here into Nome, I actually felt like time was folding back in on itself. Here I was, just like Gunnar Kaysen, mushing into Nome on someone else's dog team, on Leonard Seppala's dogs. Exactly 100 years later, exactly the same age that Leonard Seppala was 100 years earlier when he was doing it. It was like time was folding in on itself. And my father called me when we reached the finish line. It was funny. When I got to the finish line, some of the guys' families were there, but my dogs, I just went and I was loving on my dogs. And Amy Nichols, who's here, she walks up to me and she goes, "John, the mayor and Alaska News Source is waiting for you over there." And I'm just loving on my dogs, And I'm like, oh, yeah, I should probably go talk to them. But then I got a phone call from my dad. My dad said, "Are you safe?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Is your team safe?" And I said, "Yes." And then he said, "At this stage in your life, at this time in your life, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And you have done exactly what you were supposed to do." And I got to tell you that that's an amazing feeling. To know in a moment of your life that you're exactly where you're supposed to be and you're doing exactly what you were meant to be doing, that's an amazing feeling. And that's what I wanted to share with you tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Explorer. I hope my talk at the Chamber Banquet inspired you to chase bold ideas, push your limits, and keep your compass set toward purpose. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment to like, share, subscribe, wherever you're listening. It helps the show grow and keeps our stories of adventure and perseverance reaching new audiences. You can also follow me at MUSH Maine on our social media accounts and our website for updates on expeditions, writing, and upcoming events. So until next time, Godspeed and happy trails.